There's this community that is so much stranger than anybody ever tells you. It's called Lilydale, New York. It's this tiny spiritualist town on the edge of Casadega Lake. This place is known for psychic seances and for locals that claim that they could talk to the dead. At first glance, it looks like something out of a Hallmark movie. These really unique houses with colorful porches. You hear wind chimes everywhere, barefoot kids running all over the neighborhood. You're surrounded by neighbors that all know your name. And visitors flock to this town every single summer, hoping for a message from beyond, or at least some closure for their grief. But that's not the whole truth about Lilydale. The deeper you go into that town, the more that you realize not everybody there has positive intentions. There's a dark underbelly to this town that they don't want anybody to know about. And we had no idea how evil it could get until we got there. So a few years back, my buddy Tommy and I planned this awesome trip for our girls. Tommy had moved to Pittsburgh, so we hadn't seen each other in a few months, and we were just trying to figure out a way that we could get together. And one day we were talking, and he mentioned that his girlfriend Rose really wanted to go up to Niagara Falls. And I immediately had a light bulb in my head. I was like, dude, this is how we're gonna hang out. We solved it because Jess is obsessed with Niagara Falls and she's been begging to go. He loved the idea. He pitched it to Rose. She was down right away. I pitched it to Jess. She's like, obviously I'm down. What dates are we going? And before you know it, Jess and I are flying to Pittsburgh and we're pulling up to Tommy and Rose's apartment. We rented the car. We were basically going to pick them up, driving from Pittsburgh up to Buffalo, and we're just going to spend the weekend up at Niagara Falls and have a good time. So we get there. I see it's a nice apartment complex. I immediately think, I'm proud of my friend. He got a good spot. We don't even bother taking our bags out of the car. We're going to do a little apartment tour and we're going to head out almost immediately. So we walk up to the little voice box. I buzz their apartment and I'm expecting a classic like, what's up? And I'm going to be like, what's up? But when the voice comes through the voice box, it's Tommy's voice and all he says is, give me like 2 minutes. And he sounds dead serious. And this was a little bit weird because we had been so excited about this trip, but obviously I'm not gonna like buzz the box. We just wait patiently. And after a couple minutes, his voice comes through it again and he goes, guys, just come up. Something happened, but don't freak out. And immediately Jess and I look at each other and we're like, what could have possibly happened? We've been planning this for a few weeks. Hopefully nobody's hurt, but like we flew all the way out here. Are they canceling day of? Are they having like relationship problems? You know, your head just starts spiraling. We don't know what's going on. So now instead of being super excited, we're going up these stairs kind of nervous. Like what interaction are we walking into? Jess has never even met these two people, so she's extra anxious about this. And I could hear Tommy's voice coming from behind one of the apartment doors. I don't even need to knock because it's slightly open, like he left it open for us. So I very awkwardly like slightly push it open and I peek one eye past the crack first to see if something serious is going on or not, and to make sure everybody's decent in the apartment before I just barge in. And I see his girlfriend that I've never met before pacing frantically in this apartment on the phone with somebody. And I see the back of Tommy's head and his hands on his temples as if he's also kind of freaking out. So I open the door a little bit more so Jess could take a peek in before they know that we're looking in, because I want to give her the heads up that this is what we're walking into, to at least give her 2 to 3 seconds to process what's going on before our first interaction here. But she only gets about 1 second because the door hinge squeaks and Tommy whips his head around and does this half excited to see you but half I'm sorry bro, you don't know what you just walked into face. And when his girlfriend Rose sees us from the corner of her eye, she marches into the far bedroom so we can't hear her or see her. And I couldn't tell if it was because she was embarrassed or because she didn't want us here, but I was pretty happy she walked into that other room because now I could have a very transparent conversation with Tommy and get the real story of what's going on here. How much did our weekend just change? What is this? And Tommy's a very good communicator. He immediately apologized, even though he didn't really have anything to apologize about after he told us what was really going on. All he said was, so sorry dude, so great to see you. Rose just got a call that her grandmother died, like 5 minutes ago. And right away, all the weirdness goes away. We didn't know Rose that well, but we were planning on becoming friends with her over this weekend. So immediately, we're like, oh my gosh, we just want her to be okay. Once she gets off the phone, tell her to come out here. It's totally fine. She's not letting us down. Like, let us be here for her. Whatever this weekend changes into is okay with us. And Tommy didn't seem to know what the weekend was about to change into. So we just started having a little bit of small talk until we heard Rose hang up the phone. And we also heard her gather herself a little bit to try to stop crying and take a few deep breaths right on the other side of the door before she presented herself. And she came out trying her best to be bubbly. Obviously she was a little bit embarrassed. Her tears were wiped away and she opened with, "I'm so sorry you guys had to see that. I wasn't expecting to get that phone call today." Clearly she was still in a little bit of shock, but we all wanted to be there for her. We're not going to be like, okay, you're done crying, like let's hop in the car and let's get to Niagara. We wanted to talk to her a little bit, see where her head was at, and collectively as a group make a decision. We all sit down in the living room, Tommy makes a pot of coffee, and we just start talking. And we let Rose start talking. She's telling us all about her grandma and where she lived and who she is, because we thought it was good for her to vent in that moment. But after about 2 or 3 minutes of her talking, we realized that not only was she telling us about her grandma, but she was starting to explain what was going to be slightly different about this trip now. So like I said, we were in Pittsburgh and we were going to drive up to the Buffalo area near Niagara Falls. And it just so happens that Rose's grandmother lived like right in the middle and right off the highway that we were taking all the way there. And she lived in this very unique neighborhood called Lilydale. If you don't know about Lilydale, it's this community of spiritualists, people that are mediums, psychics, all the things of that nature, living collectively in this neighborhood, right on the edge of Casadega Lake. And it is this hot spot of spiritualism that people visit all the time when they're looking for closure, or they're going through major grief, or if they're just interested in exploring spirituality. It is an extremely unique area. And apparently, Rose's grandmother was at the heart of this neighborhood. She was like a pillar of this town and a well-known medium. And I didn't even really know what a medium was. So as we're having this small talks about mediums and channeling anchors, she started to suggest that we stop in that town on the way to Niagara Falls so she could say goodbye to her grandmother. I'm not going to pretend that I was super excited to do that. I wouldn't go out of my way while I'm on a trip/vacation to go to a town filled with people that talk to the dead. It's not my thing. But I'm sitting here with one of my best friends and the girl that he loves, who just lost her grandmother, and she's on the way to where we're going. How in the world can we say no? So we didn't. We said absolutely. We could stop there, we could do whatever you need to do, and we're here for you. Rose really appreciated the support that we were giving her. She didn't know how that suggestion was going to land. There was a possibility that this trip was about to fall apart. Jess and I were going to go do our thing, and Tommy and her were going to spend the weekend in Lilydale. But we were willing to bend our trip a little bit, and that was enough for her to get up, wipe her tears, grab her suitcase, and we all headed to the car. It's about 2.5 hours from Pittsburgh to Lilydale, so it was a fairly quick drive. And it's an absolutely beautiful drive, especially when you get into that west side of New York. And the closer you get to Lilydale, the more you start to understand why they chose that location for like a spiritual oasis. That area gets very woodsy, and it's the type of woods that almost reminds you of like where garden gnomes would live and hobbits and pixies. It's the type of place that feels kind of magical. It's not one of those scary forests with like the thin trees that are close together, spiky branches, and just a gray hue to it. This place is deep green. There's moss. There's a variety of foliage. It's very hilly. It looks like Bilbo Baggins is going to come around the corner and offer you a cheese pie at any second. Like if there was a place where fairies and pixies existed, this was it. So during the 2.5-hour drive there, we encouraged Rose to tell us about her grandma and tell us about Lilydale, because we kind of wanted to know what we were getting into. And she was telling us all of these scattered stories about how she would visit there when she was a kid and it was her favorite place to go, and how the town is just filled with sweet and loving people, and all of the houses are filled with her grandma's friends and everybody there is friends. And she told us about what she knew about seances and what she knew about readings, and she seemed to be really into it, but it wasn't like a part of her personality, if that makes sense. Like she was very knowledgeable about it, but she also lived her own completely different life, so she could tell you all about it, but she wouldn't like put her foot down about it. She like, if you didn't believe in it, she wasn't gonna argue with you. She's just like, okay. And we realized as we were driving, having her talk about it and having her think about the positive memories of her and her grandmother was very good for her, because it kept her in a positive mind state, at least for about 2 hours of it. Because the last 30 minutes before we got there, she started to kind of go downhill. She started to get a little bit more sad, and you have to let people be sad. But one of the things that she was doing is she was going through a bunch of old voicemails that her grandmother sent her within the last few months. And she wasn't playing them on speaker, but it was a quiet car and you could hear some of them. And a lot of it was very recent, and the grandma was really urging Rose to come visit her. And you could kind of get the sense that the grandma knew, and she really wanted Rose to come down. And that was kind of heartbreaking, because it seemed as if Rose knew that too. And you could tell that she was regretting not driving down. It's just 2.5 hours, and her grandma was almost begging. But there was nothing we could do at that point but finish the drive. So we pull into the Lilydale area, and the place is really cute. It's quaint, it's charming, it's very inviting. The architecture there, the houses, is quirky and cool. You could tell all of the people here love gardening and decorating. The place had a very good feel to it. And Rose seemed to know this place like the back of her hand. She told us exactly where to park, and she hopped out of the car and she knew exactly where to walk to her grandma's house. We didn't really know where we were going. We didn't know where her grandma was or anything of that nature, if there was some type of service going on. We were just following Rose. But she didn't really seem to be in the know about what was really going on. She was just checking major spots until we finally came across her grandma's house. It was like the third place that we checked. The place was almost a ghost town until we started to get near her grandmother's house, and we realized that almost everybody in the neighborhood was congregated there. And we started to get the sense of just how tight-knit this community was, because there was a good amount of visitors poking around the area, at least by like the major points. But as far as like people being in front of their houses and actually on their own property, like where the locals are, that's what I mean by ghost town. I don't mean the tourists poking around the area. All of the locals were at her grandmother's house, like every single one of them. And as we were walking up, it was as if we were with a celebrity. Every single person that was congregated at her grandmother's house, on the front lawn, on the porch, in the living room, they knew who Rose was, and they were delighted to see her. And I want to mention the type of demographic that seemed to live here. I don't mean this in a bad way, but it was kind of your stereotypical medium. Like a really sweet, polite, older lady, probably in her 60s, very inviting, like sweet, loving grandma type. And they all have versions of the old school 60s and 70s hairstyles, and they're all wearing like floral gardener's dresses. Just very sweet ladies. But it seemed as if that was the dominant demographic that lived here in general. So after about 20 people gave Rose the biggest grandma hug in the world, we get into the living room, and it seems as if there's two women here who are clearly in charge. And I don't mean in charge, I just mean there's a social hierarchy here, and they seem to be at the top of it. And they both have these cute, wispy, puffy haircuts, and they're both wearing floral muumuus like it's Sunday and they're gardening, and they have big smiles on their face, and they're giving us kisses on the cheek like we're their grandkids. And they start pouring words of affirmation all over Rose, trying to console her. Clearly, these two women were very close with Rose's grandmother. Rose waited to ask these two what happened in general. She didn't seem to be trying to get information from anybody else but them. And they withheld that information for that exact moment because they had a different idea of what Rose should probably do. And they very kindly asked her, would you like to see her and say goodbye? Because they definitely knew that her grandmother was calling her beforehand and Rose hadn't made it down. And naturally, Rose just nodded her head, and these two very sweet ladies turn around and they start guiding us through the house, through a hallway, and we could see this back room at the end of this hallway. There's nobody coming in and out of it, but we could hear people on the inside of this room. So we know that there's some type of gathering in here where there's maybe portraits and flowers and some type of memorial for her grandmother. And we know that this is about to be a pretty heavy thing. So we let Rose go to the front of us, and then it's me and Jess holding hands because this is a stressful situation, and Tommy is right behind Rose holding her shoulders, trying to be an emotional support anchor himself. And we follow these sweet ladies in, they open the door, we all slip in, and when we turn to take in the room and see what we're looking for, I don't understand what we're looking at first. I was expecting one of those like big funeral pictures where it's like, here's their face and here's a memorial, and who knows what they did. We didn't think that there'd be a casket in here because it's a house and they said that she died this morning, but there would be something representing her. There was nothing representing her in this room. She was in this room. The grandmother was on the floor on this like slick wooden board with a sheet neatly placed over her, laying on the floor with her eyes half open, dead. The woman is freshly laying there, and I have no idea what to say. My entire body stiffens up when I see it because I feel like I'm walking into a crime scene. and they put like flowers around her and little gifts, and they had like little candles and stuff. And in my head, I'm freaking out. Why didn't anybody like call the police? Like, why wasn't the body taken away? Why isn't it being treated properly? They just left it there and called Rose for us to drive up, and it's still there on the floor. And I know that everybody in the group is like, what did we just walk into? Why are all of these women here acting like this is normal? Nothing about this is normal. And these two very sweet older ladies are just like, say your goodbyes. But Rose didn't bat an eye. She just walks up to her grandmother and kneels next to her. And obviously, like, it's her grandmother. She might be so emotionally overwhelmed that she doesn't realize how bizarre this is. And she's just crying on her chest and holding her hand, and obviously we feel really bad for her. But I know that Tommy is thinking what I'm thinking, so the second that nobody's looking at us, I like nudge him. I'm like, dude, what is going on? And my boy's freaking out internally. He's trying to be an anchor for his girl, but he like shrugs his shoulder and he's like, dude, I have no idea what this is. And I lean towards Jess because I want to hear her opinion on this. Maybe she knows something that I don't. Is this a different culture? What's happening here? But the only whisper that I get in my ear from her is, they just left her on the floor? I have no answer for her because this seems wildly inappropriate to me. And we're just standing there like the Three Stooges, trying to pretend like we think this is as normal as everybody else does. And I felt myself like looking at her on the floor, but like trying not to, but also not being able to look away. And that's when it started to get worse, because I'm inspecting this deceased older woman on the floor and it doesn't look right. Like, I know some people get like varicose veins in their legs or their arms and stuff, like when circulation starts to go bad and they get like those purple veins. But this woman looked like she had like black spider webs up her neck, and like where her arm veins were, they went completely black. And I don't know, that might be a normal thing, but her eyes were also half open with black spider veins, and I felt like she was gonna sit up like the Undertaker at any second and take a chunk out of Rose's neck. So we're doing our best to keep our cool. We don't know what to do, so we have to wait there for like 10 minutes as Rose is grieving and mourning until she finally says her goodbyes and comes back to us. And even though Rose is in emotional shambles, she sees on our face that we're not cool with this, or at least we weren't expecting this. As much as we want to support her in this moment, you just brought us into the back room of her house and she's just laying on the floor dead. So Rose starts covering her tracks, not in like a bad way covering her tracks. She starts to explain what is going on very briefly as she's starting to guide us out of the room. And she starts to apologize a little bit because she realizes she probably should have briefed us on what was going on. And all she says is, I'm so sorry, guys. I know it's a little bit weird here. This is just how they do things. It's a very tight-knit community. This is a celebration of life and they're all coming together. This isn't weird for here. And one of the older women that brought us into that back room, as we're stepping back out into the hallway, they overhear Rose explaining it to us. So they immediately start to pile on a little bit to explain the weirdness. And all she does is mostly reiterate what Rose said about the celebration of life. And she says it in a really kind way, and her beliefs on spirituality, and that this isn't over and we shouldn't be sad for her, and that she lived a beautiful life. She was saying very kind things, and it started to make me feel a little bit better until she got to the point where she explained how the grandma passed away. And she said it so calmly as if it was the most regular thing in the world. This woman said she passed this morning during an intense seance. She passed right in that room, right where she's laying. And I know she was happy with how she went out, because she died doing what she was best at. So we're back in the living room of this house, mingling with all of these very sweet old ladies. But that doesn't change the fact that there was a dead sweet old lady about 20 feet behind us. So I'm not very interested in mingling with all the people that are here that think that that's okay. So I am locked arms with Jess. I'm not speaking any louder. Only Jess, my partner, could hear me because I'm expressing myself pretty freely at that point. I'm not even talking to Tommy really, because I know he has to do this. Like, I'm not going to start bashing this situation because I know that if I was in his situation, I'd be as supportive as I possibly could. But now me and Jess are talking while Rose is now talking to these older ladies a little bit more, and we're on the outskirts of their conversation. And I whisper in Jess's ear and I'm like, can you believe that? Like, have you ever seen anything like that in there? And of course, Jess says, "Did you see the veins on her neck and arms?" And I lean in really close to her ear because I didn't want anybody to hear me say this. And I'm like, "Did you see that they left her on a plank with her eyes open?" And Jess nods her head and goes, "Can we leave as soon as possible?" So I start shooting looks at Tommy, trying to shoot some daggers into the side of his face, so he looks over at me like, "Hey buddy, your friend has something to say to you." And he finally glances at me and he sees on my face what I'm trying to convey to him. "Dude, that was weird, let's get out of here." She said her goodbyes. I have so much empathy for her. I'm so sorry about the situation, but I don't want to be here. And he gives me an understanding nod, like he's on my side, but pump the brakes a little bit. We're almost in the clear, just give it another minute or two. But unfortunately, within that minute or two, she starts to get in a very in-depth conversation with these two lovely ladies that brought us into the dead room. And the main lady's sidekick decides to ask Rose, "Did you get a chance to talk to her at least on the phone before she passed? I know she was calling you a lot." And I'm so sorry, I'm rolling my eyes internally because why are you rubbing it into this girl's face that she was dodging her grandma's calls in her last few weeks of life? Like, you're just gonna destroy her. And it's not like she was doing it maliciously. She was just kind of ditzy. And of course, Rose starts tearing up and says, "No, I didn't. I think I'm going to regret it forever." And I think maybe this lady is going to console her and be like, "I'm so sorry I said that." But you'd be absolutely wrong because this woman doubled down and said, "Would you like to talk to her? She's still around." Jess almost couldn't keep the facial expression off of her face. I saw the disdain for that sentence start to come onto Jess's face, and then she hit it back to neutral before anybody else caught it. Because why in the world would you say that to Rose in this moment with the guilt that she's feeling? And then I remembered where we were. We're in Lilydale, where all of the mediums and spiritualists collectively live together. And these are solutions that they offer people that come and visit to talk to their dead loved ones. And I don't know why, but I felt like when we were in the house with like the inner circle, with the mediums and with these spiritualists, the people that could talk to the dead, I felt like the bit was kind of at a halt because there was no outsiders. I'm really sorry to anybody that deeply believes in it. At that moment in my life, I did not. Full skeptic. I thought it was a bit, I thought it was how people made money. I'm not gonna pretend, I don't have malicious feelings towards it. That's where I was at that moment. So when she suggested to do a reading and for Rose to talk to her grandmother one more time, personally, I found that really cruel and disrespectful. Even though the intention is to give her closure, I just felt like, hey, all the insiders are in here. We could pause the bit for a second and you could just console her and give her a hug. You don't have to pretend that her grandmother's speaking through you. But Rose loved what she was hearing. Like I said, Rose wasn't super in the life, but she did believe in this stuff wholeheartedly. And she said, if she's still around, I would love to talk to her. And these two very friendly old ladies said, come with us. And me and Jess look at each other and we have to decide, are we gonna stay in this house or are we gonna go with them to do their reading and seance in this other house? So I whisper in Jess's ear, do you wanna stay in the house with the dead lady or do you wanna go with the ladies that wanna talk to the dead lady? And Jess just grimaces and says, I'll do whatever you wanna do. Neither seemed that good. And I figured since Tommy and Rose were going with them, I think I would rather be in the house where the body isn't. So we follow them out of this house and we go right across the street. They live directly across the street in an almost identical house that just had a different colored porch. And we go in through their very cute front door and into their very old style home that's decorated adorably. And we all sit down in their living room and this woman starts to explain the type of service that she's about to provide. And I say service because that's how I viewed it. I felt like she was doing a service. I didn't feel like we were doing a real spiritual reading or doing a real seance, especially when she told us what she was about to do. So Rose and Tommy sit right across from her. There's like these two love seats that face each other with a table in the middle, and then there's some seating off to the side. Naturally, I grab Jess and we sit off to the side. I don't want to be a part of this, but I'm willing to watch. I'm willing to be here, but I'm out of the immediate radius of where this seance is occurring because that just feels a bit safer to me. And this woman doesn't pull out a Ouija board or a crystal that she shakes over a map or a crystal ball or anything of that nature. She brings out a sketchbook, and she brings out a packet of colored pencils. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a little bit intrigued about where that was going. I'd never seen anything like this, so I'm like, okay, at least we have some entertainment here. Let's see what bitch she's gonna do. And she proceeds to explain that she's going to lead the seance, and her friend here is going to be the channeling anchor to support the seance. And I'm like, okay, so leading the seance, channeling anchor. I know Rose mentioned that her grandmother was a channeling anchor for seances, so I'm like, okay, that's industry standard here. And then she proceeds to explain that she is going to do spirit-guided art. If you've never heard about spirit-guided art, let me explain. This woman explained that she was going to start the seance, invite the spirits in, and she was going to start sketching. And as she started sketching, she was going to start asking questions to the spirits, to Rose, to attract the spirits. And eventually, Rose's grandmother was going to take control of her hand, and she was going to sketch through her. So it was spirit-guided art, and it was up to her to interpret that art to get Rose some answers. So it was this very interactive live sketch performance where she's asking questions, her hand is making random sketches, she's changing colored pencils, she's asking questions to the group, into the air, to the spirits, and then she's interpreting what she's drawing based on these answers from every direction. It was a very confusing situation. I don't know if anybody's seen anything like that or been a part of something like that, but she was rather good at drawing, and her questions were very open-ended. It felt to me like one of those mentalists that goes and does those live shows where they're asking very open-ended questions and grabbing things from the crowd to play kind of like mind games to jump to conclusions that might be like a gotcha moment that might blow people's mind, be like, oh, I believe this. I wasn't participating whatsoever. Like I said, I was out of that 3-foot radius. I'm safe. This seance has nothing to do with me. So she was focusing mostly on the spirits in the air and Rose. She's drawing this beautiful sketch, and she's telling Rose very sweet things, and she's saying things like, your grandmother would like you to move on. She wants you to live a loving and fulfilling life. You could break the habits of the family tree and you could go do something different. And everything about it is like the grandma loving her, not having any disdain for her stopping visiting Lilydale. Just like, move on with your life, be happy. It's all good. You could leave. It's totally fine. And all of the questions that she's asking Rose are kind of leading towards closure, or leading towards her leaving and closing this chapter of her life and being happy with it. And from my perspective on the outside, I started to understand why these women do things like this. Because the intention is to help people and to give them closure. And it was very sweet. And they were very compassionate and very empathetic, and they knew what things to say to make people feel better in a grieving position. And I also couldn't help but to have an overwhelming wave of empathy for this woman that's doing this sketch thing, because she was a very nice lady. When I was looking at her, all I could think was, this is a woman that found purpose helping people in this way, but she kind of just looks like a little girl drawing in her room and playing make-believe. So there was something very innocent about this whole situation. And even though I was very skeptical, I didn't like that the body was in the other house, there was a level of innocence and empathy and compassion to this that I was like, I can't have anything bad to say about this. These women are like really nice. And the way that they go about making a living doing these types of performances, I'm gonna make sure I give them a big tip in the tip jar on the way out, because it's adorable. And eventually this sketch that she's doing is kind of coming together, and it's a wave of all these different colors, and the page is almost completely full. And then she asks one specific question based on what she drew. And in the dead center of this big sketch, you could see that there's like kind of like an N. Like the letter N is separating these multiple different colors. So she turns this sketch towards Rose and goes, is there anything with the letter N in your life right now that is calling to you? And like I said, very open-ended, but also like, how does she know to write the letter N? So like, still like a little weird. And Rose goes, oh my God, yes. We're all on our way to Niagara Falls. And like, yes, did she just say, is there anything about the letter N? How vague can you possibly be? But also, we were on our way to Niagara Falls. It was a little bit weird. So I kind of give it a little head nod like, okay, all right, maybe she knows a little something. And she follows up by reinforcing all of the things that she was saying prior by telling Rose, you need to go to Niagara Falls. that seems like it's exactly where your grandmother wants you to go. As soon as you can, you have found your closure here and you are allowed to move on. She's telling me that she loves you and you could leave. But the weird thing about that last spiel that she was doing was that in between sentences, she started like coughing a little bit, like a deep cough. So she'd say something very positive and nice and move on with your life, go to Niagara Falls, and then and then continue to speak. And it happened like 3 or 4 times. And the weird thing about it was she had a very high-pitched voice, just like almost squeaky, if you will. But this cough that was coming from her chest, it was guttural. It was very deep. Like you would have to have a lot of bravado in your voice to make this sound in general. Like I didn't feel like she could hit that bass. It almost sounded like something was trying to make its way out of her mouth, but she was actively stopping it. And every time she would cough, the woman that was sitting next to her, I would see that she would kind of like flex her neck a little bit as if she was attempting to restrain something. And then I started to get a little bit skeptical, because there's no way that on top of this bit that you're doing with like the sketch and stuff like that, you're gonna start to speak as if a spirit is speaking through you and you both are in on this and you're gonna like flex like you're trying to hold it back, and then this other woman is gonna switch into another voice and speak as if she's Rose's grandmother. I couldn't believe that they would actually attempt to do something like that. But the woman that was speaking and doing the reading was acting as if it wasn't even occurring. She went right back to telling Rose how much her grandmother adored her and talking about pretty specific occurrences in her childhood, that Rose was just hanging on to every word. I could see how much this was meaning to her. And this woman says to Rose, when you guys would walk through the pixie garden and you would play with the wind chimes, and then she whipped her head towards Tommy, and in a straight up male voice, she said, "I'm gonna go play Fortnite." I immediately pulled back, because I have no idea what that woman just did. It was as if she was playing with her vocal cords. She said a sweet line to Rose, and then she delivered that voice to Tommy in such an odd cadence, and then she went right back to finishing her sentence that she was saying to Rose. And it was as if it was like sweet facial expression, kind of aggressive, sweet. And it seemed as if she didn't even realize that she had said that sentence in between. And either she was the best actress in the entire world, or she didn't know that she said that. Everybody in the room noticed it. Rose leaned back. She wasn't holding on to every word anymore. Me and Jess both stood up with how weird it was. And now we're holding hands because we're like, what is going on? Deep voices and seances, that doesn't add up to a good time. And I look at Tommy to make sure he's good. He received that voice, and I've actually never seen Tommy in that much distress. It was as if there was no blood in his face. His lips looked like they were turning blue. His eyes were watering, and his Adam's apple was moving around like he was trying to hold a knot in his throat. Whatever she had just said to him, like I could see her face. It's not like her face was so overwhelmingly scary or the voice was so overwhelmingly scary. It sounded like a boy's voice. She didn't scream. It wasn't anything crazy. It was what she said. But I didn't understand. All she said was, "I'm gonna go play Fortnite." How does this old woman know what Fortnite is? She lives in the woods in the west side of New York. And she says about 2 or 3 more sentences to Rose, who's pretty disengaged now. And then just like she did to Tommy, she snaps her head and she looks at Jess and she says, 37 minutes. That's how long she laid there. And then she turns her head back towards Rose and she's talking about garden gnomes in the garden and her favorite types of lilies. And I feel Jess squeeze my hand, like whatever that woman just said that I don't understand the significance of whatsoever just shook her to her core. Now everybody in the room is looking at this woman. Her channeling anchor is like squeezing and shaking, and her eyes are completely closed, so we can't even look at her for like what's going on. And the woman that's doing this seems to not know what she's saying in between her sweet, kind sentences. So again, 2 or 3 more lovely childhood memories. And I'm just waiting for my turn. I'm ready for it, but even being ready for it, I flinched when she looked at me. And in a straight up dude's voice, she said, "Do you still grind your teeth when you're scared?" And even though I didn't know what she meant when she talked to the other people, I understood why they freaked out. Because what she said to me was something that nobody could say to me. Nobody would understand the significance of what she said to me but me. And it was as if she delivered it in that way. I'm gonna say something that everybody would need context for except for you. And there's no way in the world that I would be privy to that information. So just saying this sentence, I'm gonna shake you to your core. We sat through the rest of that session all pretty silently. Rose was answering as much as she could to finish the session up, but all of us were looking at this woman trying to gauge if she really knew what she was doing, because it was as if she didn't see the change of our demeanor about this seance session. Even after we wrapped it up and we were going, we were trying to get any sign to show us that she knew what she was doing, but she was oblivious. I knew that what she said to me, like if somebody found out the information that she found out and said that to me to my face, it was fighting words, because it was something that was so close to me and so traumatic that if someone rubbed it in my face like that to try to spook me in a seance, obviously if they were my age, we're scrapping. I don't care. That's so disrespectful to talk about my past that way to me in front of people. Obviously, because she's an older woman, I'm not going to be aggressive to her, but I wanted to understand if she knew what she just said to me. But it was like she had no idea what she said. Not only did she not understand the significance, but she didn't remember saying it. She was acting like everything was sunshine and rainbows. While I'm fuming, Tommy is holding back tears, and I see that Jessica's day is ruined. So they walk us out of this house and we're chatting out front. We could see in the distance that people are congregating, ready to walk over to some other type of gathering or ceremony. There's all that type of stuff there all the time. There's events. It was some of the people from Rose's grandmother's house, but it was also some tourists over there now. But we were still talking to these two ladies who are talking to us like we're still buddy-buddy, even though I just want to be away from them. And the woman that led the seance is encouraging us to leave and telling us to move on. All the stuff that we got from that session, you should listen to your grandmother. You don't have to come to this next ceremony. It is totally okay for you to leave. And we're all like, yep, lovely to see ya. We think you're right too. We think we should leave. And the second woman, who had her eyes closed and was flexing and channel anchoring that session, starts to back her up a little bit and starts to say, you should listen, that session went great, and also is encouraging us to leave. But the first lady turned around after she said goodbye and started walking towards whatever the next gathering was. And the second lady, as she's talking to us, pretty much reiterating what the first lady said to us, her facial expression wasn't matching the messaging. She was saying, goodbye everybody, leave, listen to your grandmother. But her eyes were telling us, don't leave, please stay, I need help. And her head was kind of shaking a little bit, as if something inside of her was trying to counteract the words that were coming out of her mouth and begging us to stay. But it was only for a split second, and she turned around and walked away. That weird moment wasn't enough for us to be like, oh my gosh, should we leave or stay? We were still completely outraged by what happened in the house. Not only outraged by the dead body that was in the first house, but about what the woman said to us in the second house. So we have our first private, collective conversation where we don't have to filter ourselves. And of course, we're going to talk about what that woman said to us. And I open up with telling Rose that I'm not really cool with this place because what she said to me was really offensive to me. And that's surprising to everybody because nobody knows the significance of what she said. But Tommy backed me up and said, what she said to me wasn't okay either, I want to leave. And I could see in Tommy's face that he wanted to tell us the significance of what she said. So I gave him the opening and I asked him, what did she mean about the Fortnite thing? And he took a deep breath. It wasn't a long explanation, but he looked at Rose and he said, remember I told you about my brother? And I immediately knew what he was talking about. So I whisper over to Jess, not talking over him, but just to catch her up to speed. And I let her know his brother took his own life in high school. Obviously, Rose already knew that, but she didn't know the significance of it. And I didn't really know. I didn't know what he was getting at. And Tommy said the last thing that his little brother said to him was, I'm gonna go play Fortnite. And he went into his room and closed the door and never came out. So that woman, during a seance, looked Tommy directly in the eyes and said his little brother's last words to his face. I thought mine was bad. That kind of overshadowed how offended I was. But if Tommy was going to share that, I was going to share with the group what she said to me. She asked me if I still grinded my teeth when I was scared, and what she was referring to, which Jess didn't even know about yet, which Tommy definitely didn't know, but I didn't talk to anybody about this ever. I was home alone as a kid one night. I was old enough to be home alone, but I was too young to defend myself, and people broke into the house. Petty robbers, nothing crazy, wasn't a serial killer or anything like that, but I was home alone and there was intruders in the house and I hid in a closet. And I was just a kid. I was so scared, I was hiding, and I was hiding for so long that even after the robbers left and my parents came home and they were looking for me, I wouldn't come out of the closet. I was hiding deep in a crevice, completely frozen and traumatized. And my parents couldn't even find me. They had to call the police. They saw evidence of breaking and entering, and they thought that somebody came in and kidnapped me, and there was this whole search when I was just in the closet. And when they finally found me, the first thing that my mom asked me was, "What is wrong with your teeth?" And apparently the entire time I was in that closet, I was so scared that I was grinding my teeth, chipping them. And I didn't even notice because I was in shock. And that woman asked me, do I still grind my teeth when I'm scared? And the answer to that question is no. That has never happened to me since. And nobody ever knew about it, except for me and my mom. There was no reason for me to explain that to anybody. There was no reason for me to bring it up, but somehow she knew. So after I get done explaining, I look at Jess to see if she wants to explain what this woman said to her. So I ask her, what did she mean about 37 minutes or what? And I know my girl, she immediately just shakes her head no and says, "I'll tell you later," which means too private, I'll tell you in private, don't want to say it around them. That's enough for me. We could have that conversation on the way home. But it didn't change the fact that whatever just happened in that house was very, very wrong. So we had a very important decision to make. Do we stay or do we go? And I know it seems like the obvious choice is to leave, but we're standing here with Rose, who just lost her grandmother, and 3 people who now have a pretty deep disdain for that woman that said those things to us. Not to mention the second woman, her right-hand lady, her channeling anchor, signaled to us that something wasn't okay. And Rose's grandmother is laying in that house, and we don't trust the people that are in charge of her body. So we're in this situation where we actually don't feel like we can leave. And the anger that we feel for the situation is enough to keep us there to try to get to the bottom of it. The woman that ran the seance told us that whatever gathering was happening was another version of a celebration of life for Rose's grandmother. So we're like, okay, she's encouraging us to leave, but we don't have to. What if we want to go to it? Let's go poke around a little bit more and see if lady number 2 actually needs some help. Because we started to get suspicious. Like, why was that entire session about telling us to leave? And then the second woman is like, no, don't leave. Like, please help me, don't leave. So we rebelliously follow the crowd to wherever this second ceremony is. And this second one is out of the main neighborhood. There's no more houses. You go down like this path into the Lilydale woods, I think they were called, and you pass this little cute pet cemetery where all these older ladies bury their dogs and cats. It's actually like really cute and wholesome, but we were still angry, so we couldn't really soak that in. And we walk down this trail that opens up into this small clearing where there's an inspiration stump. And in front of the inspiration stump is rows of benches that are like church benches. And everybody goes and sits on the benches, and then whoever's running the ceremony stands near or on the inspiration stump. And I don't know what's inspiring about this stump. It's just a tree stump with like 3 steps on the side of it. So you could like walk up the steps and then stand on a very wide tree stump. But it was interesting, it was unique, I could see its appeal. We don't go and sit on the benches, like we don't want to be a part of it. We're all the way in the back standing in case we want to leave, but we're observing what's going on. And she told us this was about Rose's grandmother, but very quickly we realized that this isn't about her grandmother at all. The woman that did the seance is standing on the stump, and she's speaking to the group. She's not mentioning Rose's grandmother. She's just running this kind of sermon, talking about loss and grief. Maybe she's going to tie it in later, but it doesn't seem like she's going to. And most of the people here, it's kind of like 70% tourists, 30% locals. So most of these people don't even know her. So internally, we're like, why would she lie about that? Why wouldn't she just be like, I'm running this event over here? Why would she be like, we're going to handle this. It's going to be this beautiful ceremony praising your grandmother for everything that she did for us, but you guys should absolutely leave. Like, it was just more suspicious. So she finishes her like opening act about pain and suffering and loss, and she starts to invite up people from the crowd to talk about their experience and why they're here. And my first thought was like, this is kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous, but like the really sad version. And everybody that she called up, it's not even like they volunteered. It was like, you come up, explain to the group what you're going through. And these people would get up there. It's not like they're good at speaking to the crowd. They'd be mumbling, they'd be stuttering, and they'd be talking about the loved one that they had just lost recently and their regrets and what they wish they had said to them and all the things that they would still want to do with them. And then about 2 minutes in, the cadence and the tone of voice would change. They would start speaking a little bit more confidently. There was a little bit more bass in their voice. They're looking at the crowd. They're speaking with a little bit of conviction. But the way that they're speaking about their loved one is no longer laced in grief and love. They kind of start poking at them. And it's almost like they start venting about the things that aggravated about the person that they were just mourning 2 seconds ago. And we watch the first person do this. They go from being scared to speak and mumbling about the person they love to speaking with conviction and almost hating the person that they came here for. And then they would continue to ramble about pain and suffering and loss in a very opinionated way. And then they would abruptly step down and let the next person up. And that person would start that process. Very quiet, very faint, very loving, a hurt voice. And then it would switch and it would get hateful, it would get resentful, and it would basically be speaking like, I don't need them. And then it would start to speak about those same talking points. The same talking points that the first woman was talking about, that the second guest speaker was talking about, that the third guest speaker was talking about. It was as if the same points were coming across no matter who was speaking. It was as if the people were rotating, but as if what was speaking through them was the same person. By the 6th person doing the exact same thing, we were ready to get out of there. We didn't have to talk about it. We shot some looks at each other. We were good on this place. Also, there was nothing that we could do here to help. We immediately turned around and we started walking back down that trail because we needed to get out of here, probably call Rose's parents, maybe call law enforcement to retrieve the body that's in that house because we don't trust these people. And there's really nothing we could do from here. So we walked down this trail, we passed the pet cemetery, and then to the left, the first house back into the neighborhood, this very cute little house, has movement in it. And I could see the movement coming from inside, running to the front door. And the front door pops open, and it's another seemingly very sweet older lady with clearly dyed black hair, waving us down frantically. She looks scared, and she looks like she needs help. We all really want to get out of here. As much as I would like to help a woman in need, we don't really trust the people that are here. We don't like what's going on. And if the group voted to keep walking, I probably wouldn't give that much pushback in that situation. You wouldn't either. Don't give me a hard time. And I look at Tommy and I look at Jess. We're on the same page. Blinders on, keep it moving. But Rose basically squeaks. And inside of that squeak, I hear the name Aunt Kiki. And Rose starts running towards that house and towards that woman who's waiting in open arms. And they have this big hug and they're holding each other's faces like they adore each other. And they're talking and we can't hear them. So we hustle over there because we need all of this information so we can make an educated decision on what we should do. And once we all get up there, Aunt Kiki makes us all get into the house and she slams the door behind us and closes the shades like she's about to tell us all of the secrets that are going on here. And after she closes the door and the shades and we're in her living room, she has like talismans near her door. She has special chimes. She's like adjusting a bunch of these things as if they're keeping something out. She does like 10 different things, like a bunch of little tactics that she knows to keep herself protected. And once she does all of them, she finally turns back at us and greets all of us. We have no idea what to say, so we let Rose lead the conversation. And basically, the only thing Rose could say is, what happened to this place? And clearly, Aunt Kiki has all of the tea. She knows what's been going down, and she opens up with, I haven't left the house for a month. I knew that your grandmother was on her way out, and I knew if you didn't show up, I was going to need to leave. And all of us look at each other a little bit skeptical, like what is she talking about? If Rose doesn't show up, she's gonna have to leave, like flee the area. And if she loved Rose's grandmother so much when she knew she was on the way out, why'd she lock herself in this place and not support her? But she cleared all that up pretty quickly. And she told Rose that the last conversation that she had with her grandmother, she basically told Aunt Kiki to do this, to lock herself in the house and protect herself as much as she can, just in case Rose needs some extra time to get here. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, was Rose's grandmother in on this too? And now I don't even trust the dead body that's in that house across the street. And then Aunt Kiki starts to go on and on about how special Rose is in a very similar way that all the other ladies were saying it, but a little bit of a different twinge to it, because Aunt Kiki was in Rose's family, and it seemed as if she understood some level of family secrets. And she started saying things like, it's always been you. Your mother and me, we didn't have it. We didn't have it like grandma. Even when you were a young girl, we all knew how intuitive you were. We could feel it off of you. Your grandmother knew that you were going to take her place. And all of these questions are going through my head. I know they're having this like heartfelt conversation, but I have no choice but to butt in. And based on my brief knowledge of what I know about this place, I just blurt out, replace her as the channeling anchor, a term that I had learned that day. And Aunt Kiki seemed to like my question because she said, exactly. Rose's grandmother was the anchor for this entire community. More commonly, people think that the channeling anchors just keep the seances going in the right direction, but that's not entirely true. What a channeling anchor does, especially my sister, is she is actually a magnet. When we open the door to speak to the spirits, we're opening the door to all of the spirits, not just the good ones. So you need somebody to keep the bad spirits from coming through. You need somebody to hold the bad spirits back. And that's exactly what she did. And she did it for this entire community. She was such a strong magnet for bad spirits that they all would flock to her. But she had the strength to hold them back. Once they came to her, they couldn't leave until she let them, and they weren't able to channel through her. She was the only one that was capable of keeping seances perfectly safe 100% of the time. And that's why this place was so beautiful. That's why it was so positive. That's why everybody flocked here. It's because we had the strongest anchor. But over time, doing that job is very taxing. And she felt it. She knew it. She could feel the bad spirits starting to corrupt her, not coming through her or making her negative or making her malicious. She knew that her body was failing her. And that's why she started calling you. That's why she was reaching out, Rose. She wanted to be here during your transition so she could help you, because you're the only one that could save this place. Naturally, we were very suspicious about the woman that did our seance and if there was any foul play with how Rose's grandmother died. But Aunt Kiki put a stop to that. She very firmly let us know that there was no foul play going on here while her grandmother was around. But the second that she was gone and seances continued to occur, corruption started happening. People started acting a little bit different, but Aunt Kiki was already locked up in her house, so there was no access to her. She was completely protected. So as the community has started to change throughout the day, it has had no effect on her. So our group had a very serious decision to make. Rose and Tommy had a very serious decision to make, because Aunt Kiki is basically telling Rose, you can't leave, and you need to step up and do exactly what your grandma did for the last 40 years. You have no say in what the rest of your life looks like, because your future is in Lilydale. I knew that my future and Jess's future was definitely not in Lilydale. But the question was, are we leaving Rose and Tommy here, or are we picking up Rose and running her out of here? Because we could see on her face that she was considering it. She's looking at her aunt who's talking about her grandmother, and she's being told that she is supposed to fulfill this prophecy as being the channeling anchor and the magnet for bad spirits, and that she's the only person that could save the town that she loved dearly as a child. So as Aunt Kiki's pouring this responsibility over her head, I'm trying to insinuate that we should probably leave, and that me and Jess want to leave literally right now. And Tommy totally agrees with us. He doesn't want to be here at all. He doesn't want to have to live here. And we think we're coming to a collective agreement. But Aunt Kiki's not liking what she's hearing. And Rose is giving us no sign about the decision that she made until she takes off running out the back door. And Aunt Kiki steps in our way, trying to block us. She's an older lady, but she's still a roadblock. Rose gets out of the back door and she starts sprinting back towards the inspiration stump. So we have to turn around, unlock like 10 locks off the front door, knock some wind chimes out of the way, pull down a talisman, kick the line of sea salt that's lining the front door, and start sprinting after Rose past the pet cemetery down this path to this bizarre ceremony. And we're right back to where we started, watching this weird seance lady standing on this tree stump, now openly speaking in a very clear male voice to this packed clearing of grieving individuals. And Rose gets there first. She skids to a halt and she's staring at the lady at the tree stump. She's taking deep breaths, and the lady that's on the stump is staring back at her. And they're in this standoff, glaring at each other. And the woman that's on the stump is still speaking as if she's trying to repeat the same talking points as many times as she possibly can to the people in the stands. But Rose takes a step forward, and you could see the slight panic in the woman's eyes. But it's not just her. People in the crowd start standing up and screaming at Rose, like one at a time. The first one stands up and says, "We don't want you here. We didn't want your grandmother here, and we don't want you here." And Rose completely ignores them and continues to walk forward, breathing very deeply and being very calculated with her steps. And another person in the crowd stands up and throws like a handful of dirt at her and is screaming obscenities at her, telling her that she's a horrible person. But they're not attacking her, they're just screaming. And then the third person stands up, and then the fourth person, and all of these people are shouting horrible things, taking turns. But the interesting part is that all of the voices sound exactly the same. And Rose just keeps walking forward. And the closer that she gets to this tree stump, the woman that's on it, she starts visibly shaking. Her hands are shaking like she has the most violent Parkinson's known to man. So much so that her head is bobbing and shaking each way like she's on a roller coaster. And as Rose passes the people in the bleachers, they stop screaming, and the only one left is the woman on the stump, who's violently shaking and screaming at Rose to leave and to get out of here. But Rose doesn't stop. She keeps moving forward, and the woman on the stump starts threatening her. Violent threats, horrible, graphic threats. But the closer Rose gets, the more that woman starts backing off and starts walking down the steps of the stump and backpedaling into the group, as if whatever they're saying doesn't match what they're gonna do. They're just trying to threaten her. And Rose walks all the way up to the stump, and once she steps on the first step, the woman stops screaming, and all of the people in the crowd are shaking. Everybody that the voice had come through is violently shaking until Rose gets to the top of the stump, and she starts to speak. She's not speaking like the others are speaking. She starts to give a beautiful eulogy about her late grandmother and about how she was the anchor of this place, and what Lilydale is supposed to be, and the way that we're supposed to operate. And we didn't know Rose that well, but we didn't know that she could speak like this. And I could tell that all of us felt in that moment that she actually was where she was supposed to be. Even Tommy realized, because the way that she was speaking to these people, and the way that all of these violent, screaming individuals stopped shaking and became calm and loving within a few moments of her absorbing the bad energy of the area, we knew that Aunt Kiki was right, and we knew that she had to stay. So we all sat down in the back row and we watched this ceremony, and we watched Rose so naturally heal one person after the other, not through a fancy seance or a reading, but just by speaking and by removing the bad spirits from the area, allowing people to actually heal. It was an incredible gathering, and Tommy loved that girl to death. So it only took about 2 sentences for me to understand that Jess and I were going to Niagara Falls alone. Everybody dispersed, and we said our goodbyes, and Jess and I headed out, and we finally got to the car. And even though it seemed as if everything was okay and Tommy and Rose were happy, I still had to check on Jess. So I asked her, when that woman during the seance spoke to you, what did she mean? And Jess looked at me like her heart was broken. And she said, "You remember my cousin that passed away in that car accident?" For months after it happened, I asked myself one question every single night. I couldn't get this question out of my head. How long did she suffer on the side of that road after that man ran away from the accident and left her there to die? I always kind of hoped that she died on impact and didn't feel a thing. That woman today told me that she was alive in that car for 37 minutes, and the police told us that the car started to set fire 17 minutes after the collision. She burned for almost 20 minutes. That woman answered my question. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that story. Hello to the 10,000 new subscribers from last week. It's very exciting. The channel is growing. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. To all of the new subscribers and also to all of the subscribers, we go live every Thursday at 7 p.m. before we upload the new video. Please come to the lives. We want to give you free merchandise. We want to hang out. If you ever wanted to reach out to me or ask me questions or just hang out with us in general, please come to the lives Thursdays at 7. We give away a ton of stuff and it's a very good time. And also, if you're new to the channel and you haven't watched all of the videos, this channel was meant to binge. It's not meant to cherry pick videos. I want you to go back to the oldest video and watch every single video until the most current, because there's so many Easter eggs and so many great stories in the catalog that you just can't miss. So let me know in the comments if you started your binge. Let me know in the comments if you're gonna come to the live, and make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next Thursday. And if you like this video, I would like to personally recommend this one.